Alright, welcome over here to another edition of What the Fuck Happenings here. Still in Mendham. One of the last videos, I suppose, from Mendham. I had hoped to do a walk and talk, one last one or something like that, but probably won't have time. I still have a lot of crap to pack and shit and stuff. So anyway, I did see in a comment that somebody left where they asked something about why I have to move and all that crap. But yeah, a developer bought the property I rent on, and the existing landlords haven't done anything for like 10 years, and so everything's falling apart and blah blah blah. And so he basically wants to tear everything to pieces and start over, and so he doesn't really want tenants around to get in the way. And so everybody got kicked out. Everybody was left. Me and my neighbor mostly, and after, you know, he was living here 25 years and I was living here 40 years, and it just kind of sucks. And I have an anxiety disorder and haven't been more than 2 miles from my house in 25 years, so it's going to be a big transition, moving and such. I don't really like the idea of it at all, but what are you going to do? It's like dying. You know, it's going to happen. And, I don't want to deal with it, but you got to deal with it. And yeah, it just sucks. So that's what sucks about this whole package of being alive, is some of it you're not going to be at all ready for, or you're not going to want. You know, it's going to be nasty bits, and very nasty. And it's like, yeah, why bother making the mess in the first place? The desire and addiction mess, because it's all for nothing in the end, and that's all it is. It's just doing it over and over again, and doing it badly, in a sense. Marginally compromised, sloppy. And yes, it has its little fun bits, its rewards, but by percentage and by magnitude and by almost any way you can measure them, the rewards are meager and fleeting, and, you know, almost nothing compared to the weight and gravity of the very hard bits. But we're addicts, and so addicts endure a lot of crap to keep sustained, to get by, and that's what they do. That's by definition, sort of. But why would you create one? Like I said, it's just a... You can invent any kind of needing thing. So in a sense, this is an argument like you could just say, would you tomorrow invent an alien, you know, just so it could want things and need things and have little happy experiences and sad experiences and go through all this crap? I mean, it would be just silly to do it. The only story that really makes sense to you is your own, if you really think about it. You know, it's the only story that makes sense. And it only makes sense because of your addiction, you know, because of your inflated perception of your own somethingness. Like you're something and everything else is something else, you know. You know, me is different than them in our brains somehow. And you know, not necessarily in reality. Better than, whatever the right word would be. Somehow it can make more sense that you survive, even though you can't make much sense out of anybody else's survival. I can't anyway. You know, I can't see a purpose in any of you. I can see more purpose in flowers growing, and there's, you know, a tree in the yard, than I can see in most of the humans walking the earth. You know, nothing personal. It's just a fact. I just wouldn't invent them. if I had a world to plant, I wouldn't be planting humans. Ugh. You know, especially foreign ones. Ugh, forget about it. Just a fact, you know. And I don't see any people working all that hard to make aliens or to make subspecies or to do any of that stuff, because I don't think they see much purpose in it. You know, much utility. It's almost like you might have a kind of dog you like or whatever, and you'll be like, yeah, I could do without all those other kinds of dogs. You know, this kind is really cool. The rest of them are just kind of stupid. Hell with it. Why make those? Yeah. So, you know, conversation. I'm just rambling in terms of just perspective and how to do this philosophy thing. So anyway, so that's just been sort of this Piro Hothaday me conversation that's not happening in any kind of coherent way, where any statements are actually written down and said, okay, that's a good statement to start with. You know, we probably agree on the fact that human life evolved on Earth, so we might have some things we can agree on, but we don't seem to even be able to write those down and say, okay, let's start with whatever. We have some facts here we can start with. And it is this weird extremes from my perspective, where Piro sees the word life meaning something, where I would say the only thing that means something is sensation. The rest of it is just strategies. I would argue that we don't do anything but strategize to have pleasant sensations, to avoid being kicked out of your house, or avoid having to move, and avoid having to do things you don't want to do. That's all our strategies are ways to get what we want or what we need. So most of the intelligence we're applying is just strategies, and the strategies exist because we need to satisfy this condition of feeling better, not worse, and that's the real objective. And once that's established, once it's understood, I mean, once everybody can agree that that's the thing that's important. So Piro doesn't think that's important. He thinks being alive is important, whatever that means. And he thinks feelings, I guess, can be created in things that don't have, as if there's some reason for something to feel if feelings don't have a purpose. So I would argue that evolution doesn't make things feel that can't do anything with the feeling. Like, there's no point in a plant feeling like running away when it can't run. You know, oh, I'm on fire. I gotta run. Yeah, it doesn't have any choices. Can't really do anything about it. Can't make a decision. So what's the point? You know, can't decide, oh, I better run away. No, can't really do that. It's a, you know, I argue that the reason why we feel is because feelings create reward and punishment. They create the idea of right, wrong, and whip, carrot. And so that's how you learn. You can't really learn unless something tells you you did it right. And for a feeling organism, doing it right means I feel better. I feel more comfortable. I'm not as worried. I'm not this. I'm not threatened. I'm not. So what we engineer as strategies are strategies to make our environment less threatening, to pull the weeds out of our garden, to get the, you know, to get the people we don't like out of our way, or to get the stuff that's in our way out of our way, that kind of thing. We're just strategizing to feel comfortable in our environment. And so it all comes down to feelings. And I'd say that's an evolutionary purpose, is to use feelings to reward and punish. And the rewards are usually have to do with feeling better, and feeling better usually has something to do with being physically secure. That is, well fed, well fucked, not stressed, and they'll be rewarded for that, and so you can, it'll be conducive to your survivability if you can do that in an adaptive way to almost any environment, that you can figure out how to be comfortable in any environment, more environments than less environments. And that makes you a stronger organism, and that's why evolution has rewarded that as success. So the mechanism works as a tool, having reward and punishment, having the capacity to learn as an individual, to deal with individual circumstances and adapt to them. You'll be rewarded, and it's conducive to your survival if you can do that, and you'll be rewarded because evolution's going to end up rewarding you for that. That means it's going to end up making you feel better. So that's why it exists. We feel because feelings give thinking more purpose, in the sense that thoughts, okay, that produce results in terms of fixing the problems, means you'll feel better because you fixed problems. So it's not as a direct statement as I want about just how integral to the function of learning it is to have some mechanism that says you got the right answer and it gives you a cupcake. That if it doesn't reward you, you won't get right answers because it won't matter. So you have to get the right answer, you have to solve problems, and you will feel better. That's your reward for solving problems. Now, a lot of the problems are created because we have innate sensations and innate triggers, and those triggers compel us, and that's sort of the addiction thing, the sex thing, the food thing, warm enough temperatures, all that kind of sensation. Those raw ones are compelling, and they drive a lot of our behavior, but they can be they are, as a practical fact, slightly modified. So you have these really crude, just basic thing, like you're going to be horny for something. Then conditioning, that is a kind of learning that happens in your early maturation, will decide the character of what you desire exactly. The specifics of what you find attractive was going to be decided in those, whatever, first 6 or 7 or 8 years. And you'll be stuck with some of that. In terms, it's hard to redo that conditioning. So what you're going to be, whether you're going to be afraid of spiders, or whether you're going to be, horny for, big butts, or whatever the thing is that's going to turn you on, is going to be sort of decided in a less direct way than you thinking about it and making some kind of decision. You're not really going to make a decision. It's sort of going to be imposed on you. And that stuff's sort of tough to redo. You can't sort of change your food preferences and stuff. It's not that easy to change. But then on top of that layer, though, is another layer where you can modify some of that conditioning and modify some of those knee jerks that are inside of you by having this whole inhibiting, thoughtful layer in your brain, where you process and you recognize that, oh, I don't want to be an asshole. You figure out that assholes suck, and so you try not to be an asshole, and you try not to dress too stupid, and you try not to do things that are, annoy people, and you try to figure out different strategies to avoid being obviously manipulative, or obviously this, or obviously that. And those are all more complex layers of where you process your behavior, where you see yourself doing it, you imagine yourself, and then you imagine what the consequences are, and then you can see long-term consequences versus short-term consequences, and you can make evaluations where you can sort of change the cupcake in your mind. You'll see the cupcake and you'll smell it and you'll say, oh, it smells good, and ooh, I want to eat it. And then your thoughtful brain will say something like, it's full of chemicals and it's fattening and it's garbage calories, and it won't do you any good in the long run. It'll give you a heart attack, and it'll do, you know. And so you can make the cupcake into something dirty and maggot covered, okay, with your images, your mental, putting a new screen with drawings on it with a little Hitler mustache on the cupcake. So you can sort of Hitlerize the cupcake in your mind and play with that innate conditioning. So the innate conditioning says, I want it, but your intelligence has applied a bunch of, you know, Hitler mustaches and basically told you, no, that's really Hitler. And it's sort of, it happens with a lot of things, like, you know, relationships, or, you know, you can be really attracted to somebody, but then your intelligence realizes, well, the person isn't very, you know, we don't have much to talk about, we don't have too many common interests, and even though she's hot as hell, you know, blah blah blah, and she's done it before, and she's been divorced 17 times, and blah blah blah, and, you know, you can go through it. Oh, and she has 17 kids, and, you know, you can figure out ways to kind of, you know, draw that Hitler mustache on her lovely fat ass. And you say, no, I don't want that after all. And so those are the layers of our function, is that we have these innate things, and we have these conditioned things, and then we have these things that we can call intelligence or knowledge that you gain through life experience that enable you to make things uglier or make ugly things prettier, and modify your perception in such a way as you'll be able to act on the more intelligent, you'll be able to make the more intelligent choice, because your intelligence is essentially fooling the more crude knee-jerks, and it's changing their trigger by manipulating what they see. You know, so if you were to use, I've used analogies in the past like lizard, ape, human. You know, that these are the layers of our, you know, the civilized human, the ape, and then there's the crude lizard functions. And what's basically happening is the human is trying to fool the ape, and the ape is trying to fool the lizard. It's just layers of sophistication. So it's sort of like what nature does with people, in the sense that it's played, you know, all organisms that feel essentially have been played, you know, in the sense that they are driven to have sex, and the consequence is reproduction. You know, so they're made to sort of be implying that they want to reproduce, when no, they want to have sex. And so one tool is being used, you know, to accomplish a different end. So it's like using a hammer as a screwdriver, and, you know, so you're being fooled by the nature. Nature's trying to trick you into doing the thing it wants to have happen, the thing that's being evolutionarily rewarded. And there's almost no connection between the actual action that produces the result. I'm sure if salmon knew, you know, that when they swim upstream they're going to get deformed and die, you know, they wouldn't swim upstream. They'd say, the hell with it, I'm not going up, I'm not heading to that fresh water, I'll just stay here in the ocean and not deform and die. You know, it ain't worth it. But they don't know. The chemistry compels them. They smell the cupcake, and they don't have enough intelligence to know the cupcake is a trap that's going to have them, you know, blow their load and die. And they just don't know. They don't have knowledge of that. So they're just driven by the positive, driven by the seduction of the lizard programming, and they just don't have the more sophisticated understanding to escape the doom, the trap. It's traps. They're all traps. It's the nature of the game we're playing. It's just a game of traps. So, why would somebody do this on purpose, create another human being to just face these traps of life? And we say how many people fall into them, just reckless decisions that maim them for life or paralyze them for life, substantially degrade their future progress, lots of tragedies, little murders taking place every day in terms of how people's potential is ruined. They have to work to go to school, and then they can't get good enough grades, and they drop out, and blah blah blah, and all kinds of shit happens to people where it's just waste, terrible amounts of waste. And because there's so many traps, so many ways to break your leg, and and that's the way the game is made. The game is made to have mostly losers, not mostly winners. That's the evolutionary plan, is to make 1 million and kill 99% of them in some sort of brutal way, so a few survivors can successfully reproduce and improve your genetic lineage, its future on Earth. So anyway, so it's just a dismal game to be playing. It's a dismal game to throw somebody into. So there's just so many reasons why people should have real caution, real pause before jumping into this activity of making human beings, because you can see, the wreckage. It's all over the place, and you have to be in some bizarre kind of denial not to see it. And then, then we have the other obvious problem of we exist in quite chaotic times where none of the rational rules are being obeyed. The checkbook is not balanced. The credit card is way overdrawn. Lots of things set up for real disaster. The environment has been pushed, and it's pushing back. Lots of reasons to have no good idea that it's going to be fun. The future is going to have lots of fun in it. It looks like the future is going to mean foobar for an awful lot of human beings, especially poor ones. And these are the people who are having most of the children. The people who have really no facility to rent a boat if they need one. No ability to float above the crisis. No cash to buy themselves an escape hatch. No money to build their kids a bridge over the troubled water. And that's just, that's almost a malicious crime. To not have any superpowers, and have a kid into a world where they're going to need superpowers. They're going to make it, to survive. Not even to survive, wrong word, to thrive. Just have some hope of staying above the sewage. So anyway, so why it would be important. So this is another part of the conversation with Pirro and Hothloday. So Pirro overemphasizes the fluffy wonders of life bullshit, and Hothloday underemphasizes all of that. So he doesn't appreciate any of it as meaning anything. And we'll go so far as to say even for himself, which seems like just an overt lie. But this is another one of the logical things, is that, it's pretty easy to understand when you think about your existence and what you're doing, and then to just recognize that all these other people are doing the same thing. They're just trying to strategize achieving comfort. And even though what they think comfortable is, the fact that they're watching some inane TV show or doing some other kind of silly thing and having a beer and blah blah blah, and they're like, oh yeah, that's great, and maybe that doesn't make any sense to you, I mean, most of what people do for pleasure doesn't make much sense to me. You know, like traveling even to a foreign country and go through, why would I want to go through all that crap? You know, bug-infested hotel rooms and all, you know, for what? You know, it doesn't make any sense to me. But obviously, those people doing it think that's a good time. So somehow that's comfortable to them. That's interesting and compelling. And so it doesn't have to make sense to you. But what does make sense is understanding that all they're doing is the same thing you're doing, is trying to maintain a level of interest and motivation and comfort, to feel okay about their life and their circumstances. And they're just trying to achieve this not having cancer thing, you know, not being bored or you know, that one always seems mysterious to me, just because there's so many things to do, especially now with technology. There's just so many. You could have almost any interest and, you know, have almost any subject or any field you could play around in, any hobby you can have. It's just so deep, the level you could go into it. It's like almost any kind of software program. Some of it has such a level of depth that you could spend decades, you know, just becoming familiar with how to use it well. You know, every tool has so many. It's like one of those Swiss Army knives. Well, now the knives have almost 1,000 little things on them you can pull out. And so it's like there's so many tools you could make use of. That being bored does seem kind of a silly idea, but you know, clearly it happens to people. And you know, just because their psychology is a little different, their trains of thought are a little bit more impulsive and immediate, and so they need to be fed on time. You know, can't wait an hour, can't wait 10 minutes. Everything has to be now, or whatever the thing is. So but the point is we can understand all of that. We can understand, okay, maybe I don't understand other people, but I understand what they're doing is feeling. And they either feel good and they feel bad. And even if I hate them, feeling bad is still feeling bad. You can't, you know, there's nothing that makes that go away as a bad. It's intrinsically bad when a feeling thing feels bad, even when it's a shitty feeling thing. It just doesn't matter. Bad is always bad. Blindness is always blindness. It's always a bad thing. You know, in terms of a diminishment of, you know, a limitation, a confinement, a prison. And you always would prefer that everything be free, that everything have wings, that everything be not harmed, ideally. But we're so far from that perfection, and yet people are quite satisfied that this is good enough, even though we're so far from that. So the underlying point I'm trying to get to is this thing where it seems like Hathaway could almost not understand how easy it is to recognize that, as much as I would like to think I'm important and that my kids are better, or, you know, these silly things people do, that it's just so obvious that that's not the rules. That's not how the reality is. The reality is all of these other things are just as important. Their sensations, their quality of life, how they feel is just as important. And even if they're hateable and despisable, it's just a fact that their pain is just as meaningful as your pain. And if your brain is focused on the idea that comfort good, discomfort bad, it really doesn't have any excuse to think the only thing that needs to be comforted is you. That would be retarded. Your brain would have to be pretty stupid not to realize that that doesn't make any sense. that the value is in the thing, the feeling better. And it doesn't matter whether feeling better happens over there or it happens over here. Feeling better is the good. And so your brain has to think in terms of, well, if 10 people will feel better if I don't eat the apple pie, well, then I have to not eat it. Because, yeah, the 10 feeling better for the one me feeling better just isn't good economics. It's a waste. So you have to, you're obliged to, by that logic, to be economical in your consumption and not be a selfish asshole. At least attempt not to be one. Make some effort to contain to a reasonable excess your selfishness. And especially when it's just words. When all you have to sacrifice is telling the truth, then it's sort of easy. It's very easy for me to say the words that you're just as important as I am and your welfare is just as important, and if the government's going to spend money on welfare, it should do it in some economical way, and if I'm too expensive, then yes, I should be thrown in the garbage, because yeah, if you can make 5 other people whole, through some medical procedure, for the same amount of money you could make 1 person whole, well, yeah, you got to go with the 5. If you can fix 5 broken things versus the 1 kind of thing, so we're all obliged to meet some sort of economy, not to be wasteful of this precious resources that exist to make people feel better. Now, an example of my failure to do that could just be in the way some of these videos I make them. I might argue that that's just because they're coming out of my personal engine. I do make them without writing them or preparing them, so they're going to be tainted by personal anger, animosities, all of that stuff. But I probably should, in my approach, attempt to be more to be more generous and less selfish, in the sense of allowing those emotions to provoke me to attempt to spread the fire, or fight back, or get revenge, or I wouldn't say I ever do that, but I just should be more mindful that I could be hurting people, okay, that don't necessarily need to be hurt to be educated. Unfortunately, the two things do sort of go together. We do function by reward and punishment. You can't reward people for being assholes. You do have to kind of punish them for being assholes. But again, the point, the end game is still what works and what in the end will prevent more harm and suffering. So again, that's how you get into this prevention argument, that the best way you can prevent it is not to make the mess in the first place. The best way to prevent waste is not make a waste engine. And the fact is that humans are essentially waste engines. Their needs don't need to exist, and then they satisfy their needs many times by cannibalizing other people, by exploiting their poverty, or exploiting their excess population, or exploiting some circumstance to their benefit, and substantially harming other people for their benefit. And that's our nature, essentially, is that element of selfishness. Why create that in the first place? Why make that mess to have to fix it when you can't even fix it? You can only reduce how much waste there is. You can't eliminate the waste. So it's not a good idea. So those are just the, that's sort of the general picture. That it's just kind of obvious to me that what really matters for me is how I feel. That's the most important thing. There's a cliche like if you have your health, you have everything. It's sort of true. That if you can just feel okay, then everything else is just a little bit of a head game, right? It's just you trying to find motivation and mechanisms to make that happen without falling into the alcoholism trap or the drug addiction trap or all these other little traps. Avoiding the traps, avoiding unnecessary stepping into sticky traps, or stepping into the quicksand. If you can avoid doing that, you don't have to clean you don't have to wash your clothes, you don't have to buy a new pair of boots, you don't have to do any of this crap if you're careful. You don't ruin your shoes if you're careful. So you don't waste. Yeah, so this just isn't that complicated in terms of figuring out what the basic value is. So the basic value is feeling good, and the best way to feel good is never to create a bad feeling in the first place. Never walk into the I need to feel better. So if you don't feel bad, you don't have to feel good. That's effectively. It works that simple. And once something does exist, though, its obligation is essentially to recognize that there's an economy to the, so many analogies you could use. There's only so much, you only have so much Windex, and you have so much glass to clean. And so the clever thing to do is to clean the pieces that aren't too dirty, so you don't waste it all on one terribly dirty spot. Doesn't get all the glass cleaner. You only have a tiny bit of clean glass then. The idea is to get as much light through as possible with as little cleaner as possible. Lots of ways you can analogize it, but that one just popped into my head because I guess I've been cleaning, so it popped into my head. It's funny. Not really funny, just a little bit funny. So, I need to drag on. So the premise here, the function here is just so kind of simple. Where what's valuable is kind of obvious. Feelings. They're where the value is. They generate the thing that's of value. Feeling good is good. Feeling bad is bad. Got it. Doesn't matter who's doing the feeling, because the feeling is just a feeling in the universe. Doesn't matter whether it's feelings happening in asshole. Doesn't matter whether the feeling's happening in retard. Doesn't matter where it's happening. The feeling is what it is. And the dilemma is to use your intelligence to figure out how to best interact with this chaos that is managing the feelings. Government, culture, politics, all this stuff that is managing where the chaos is, where the feelings are being wasted, where there's waste, and how where the wrong rewards are provided, where there's wrong incentives, backward incentives, where people are rewarded for being assholes. This kind of all this stuff that creates waste. The dirt on the mirror, and the real objective of intelligence is to come up with strategies to interact with this mass of stuff, of people, and attempt in some way to influence it in such a way where it moves, it changes, and increases efficiency, the efficiency of what the feeling bits, what circumstance they're in, and elevates their condition. And long-term solutions might might require short term. You might have to break some eggs to make the good omelet. You might have to do some things in the short term that seem nasty to help protect the long term from disaster. So like Smallpox Mary, whatever the hell her name was. What the hell? I always forget. Cooties Mary. What was her name? Mary. I don't know why I always forget that. It's just kind of funny. But anyway, you know, the idea of somebody having a disease and they're immune to it, but they carry it, you know, and you know, they're not malicious, but there's certain rules. You can't do what you want to do because you're going to spread your disease and kill people in a horrible way. And so you have to do something negative. You have to essentially punish her for not committing a crime per se, but it's just a fact that yes, you can't do the things you want to do, which is be a cook, when you carry a contagious disease that'll kill people. Just a fact. And even with crime and punishment, it's not like you're okay, so somebody's stupid and they do some dumb crime. Well, the fact is you can't reward them for it. You have to punish them to create deterrence. So in the long term, by preventing more crimes, you're doing a good thing that is worth the bad thing of saying I have to punish you. You know, the bad is causing, you know, harm to feeling people, and that's not good. But when you know that's going to prevent even more bad feelings in the future, you have to do it. So these are the hard choices of life. If you want to be efficient, you're going to have to do things you don't want to do. If you want to help feral cats, you don't cut their nuts off and throw them back to the wild. You humanely let them die. You know, let them go to sleep and not wake up. So you end the threat. You end the reproduction. You end the future generations that will have to be dealt with. You have to have a real solution. And the solutions people choose are, you know, convenient to their sensibilities. They make them feel good, like they're solving the problem. I'm saving the animals. No, you're sentencing them to death and disease and death. You're sentencing them to a great deal of suffering. You're not saving them. You're directly imposing on them harm. And that's just a fact. It's just the way it's going to turn out. The happy ending is the graceful exit, not the ungraceful, sloppy reproduction and then sloppy death. That's not the good answer. The good answer is no reproduction and a graceful exit. It's the only sensible way to solve the problem, and the only efficient way. The rest of them will just make the problem worse. So again, it's, you know, you can make analogies to when people starving in another country because they've way overpopulated and they don't have any resources, and you send them food and aid to try to save their lives, and what they do with the money is make more babies. So they just make it, they essentially guarantee that the crisis will re-arise in the future. And so you won't have saved anybody. You'll just make sure the next time it happens it'll be even worse, and the next time it happens it'll be even worse. And you know, now we have even in civilized countries, half the population is on, you know, government food. You know, half the kids are being raised in less than sufficient environments, in really dirty, sloppy nests, you know. And that's because we have a wrong incentive system, and because we don't have the courage to do what needs to be done, which is to accept some short-term discomfort in obliging people to earn the right to have kids, to measure up to be up to the task, because it's a real job. It's, you know, it's not some kind of hobby. You know, it's a real job, and you got to be a real professional to be raising kids. It can't be just some kind of dopey hobby. And if it is, there should be a disincentive that punishes you if you think that works, so other people get the message that they're not going to win if they don't have the skills, that they have to acquire the skills to be a parent before they're parents, or else they're not going to have a good time. So, something like that. I actually found these sweatshirts of that horse. I have 3 of them. Yeah, so I'll put those up for sale someday. It's funny, stuff you find. Stuff, I don't remember painting 3 of them, but I did. Anyway. I think I still have that pillow, actually. Yeah, a lot of stuff I still have. Anyway, gave away a hell of a lot of stuff, and I still have stuff. I actually sold that, so I actually did sell that one. But I got like $50, and you know, it's obviously more than $50 worth of work. But anyway, think about that. Yeah. Yeah, I still have that box too. I've used it for the last 10 years. Put my SD cards in it. Anyway. So I think that's enough of a ramble, just doing this simple overview thing, that this game we're playing is so simple in some ways. We're just feeling machines. We're just trying to elevate the condition of the feeling things to some kind of better than horrible. But realistically, it's always horrible because there's traps all over the place, and some of the traps are completely unavoidable, like the trap that's going to eventually kill you. One of them you will fall in, the disease and death trap, and so it's really not a game that you force somebody to play. It's not good enough to force somebody to play it. It's way too dangerous, way too minimal in its real accomplishment. That's probably enough to say right there. I mean, way too much risk for way too little reward. And we know that's the truth of it. We know these romantic notions that it's all, paradise. No, it's not. It's like when Shakespeare wrote Romeo and Juliet. If he wrote it as some sort of love story, right, where they meet and it's fun and it's wonderful, and then they go into their domestic life, wouldn't be much of a story, right? Because you're just going to know that's just married with children. I mean, that's just it's just going to turn into some kind of, ain't going to be paradise. And no. So the happily ever after notions and the idea of the ideal separate from any kind of reality just doesn't happen. There's no Garden of Eden where every day is just charming. It just doesn't happen on planet Earth. And too many people have a notion that that's what they're going to give their kids or something. It's just so unrealistic. And again, as I've stated before, even the idea of the perfect romantic peak it takes a lot of work of deprivation for you to have enough appreciation for it in the first place. And then once you get it, you're on the peak, you're on the point, and any move the wrong way, it's all down, it's all tumbling down on the rocks. There's nowhere to go but down, once you get there. And that's a terrible thing to do to somebody. Set them up for to achieve the goal and then to have it sort of evaporate as a victory. Yeah, that sucks. So anyway, you could just go on and blah 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 blah, but I'm tired and there's probably no need to at this point. So we'll see if I'm able to make any other videos. I mean, I should make some video just walking around showing the place for the last time or whatever and blah blah blah, but we'll see what gets done. There's, you know, so many little details to take care of, so much crap, blah 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 blah. Well, I'm just getting really tired. It's just the whole thing's been a rough month. So anyway, till the next time and such. There's a button here to hit somewhere and so forth and whatnot. Oh, that's a keyboard thing, that's right. Alright, so till the next time, such.